you have to just say, why not me? Because I've said so many times already in this interview, I don't feel like I'm a real author. I don't think I'm a particularly great writer. But I just went, why not me? And just tried to be a little bit almost dissociative about it, to be like, I'm just going to pretend that I'm going to write a book. And so I'm just going to do it.
Like, Denise, everyone on the internet knows you, but I'm going to read your fancy third person bio from your website because I just love that you say that, like you admit to that. Cause it's always like, even as a copywriter, I always think it's weird that like we write to someone on our website and then all of a sudden we're flipping the script and being like, Megan does this. So Denise Duffield-Thomas is the money mentor for the new wave of online entrepreneurs who want to make money and change the world. She helps entrepreneurs charge premium prices, release the fear of money, and create first class lives. That sounds like what you did as a result of, or what I did actually as a result of us working together. Her books, Lucky Bitch, Get Rich Lucky Bitch, and her newest, which I helped you with, Chill and Prosper, give a fresh and funny roadmap to living a life of abundance without burnout. And Her Money Bootcamp has helped over 10,000 students from all around the world. Denise describes herself as a lazy introvert. She's a Hay House author, and she's an unbusy mom of three, and she lives in Australia with her family and her fur babies. Welcome, Denise, to the pod.
Hi. I can't tell you how awkward it is sometimes sitting when someone reads out your bio. Isn't it horrible?
Well, especially if you're on YouTube, which this is, watched by like tens of people, but like it's just like you're sitting there like,
So,
I have YouTube face.
oh, I actually was on a podcast recently with a guy, which I don't actually speak to a lot of men in my world, but he'd obviously put my bio through Chat GPT to like make it a bit more beefy and manly. It was so cute, but it was like, she's crushing it at blah, blah, blah. And I was like, sitting there going, awkward.
Oh my God. Okay, but in your bio, we talked about this third book, Chill and Prosper. So I have to admit that Denise wrote this book by herself, but you came to me through our mutual friend, Furnished Robbie, for your proposal. So can you tell me a little bit? We're going to back all the way up to like day one of you becoming an author. How did you publish your first two books, Lucky Bitch and Get Rich Lucky Bitch?
Yes. Okay. So I I have to go back, right? Because I think like growing up, writing and well, first of all, reading was the most important thing for me growing up. I was such a bookworm as a kid. And I think a lot of that has got to do with my undiagnosed ADHD for my whole life, because I would read to calm my nervous system. Um, I had a very chaotic kind of childhood. And so I really lost myself in books. But I was literally like walking to school reading during all of my classes. And if I would get in trouble for reading, I'd be like, you asked for this. And then I would kind of be quite disruptive. And so books were always super important. And I remember I was at a house party with my mum when I was young, and someone had a typewriter and they let me play with it. And I just went, oh my God, this is the most amazing thing ever. So for my ninth birthday, my mum bought me a typewriter, which was the most incredible present ever. She was a single mom, she didn't have a lot of money. And she bought this electric Olivetti typewriter, a little blue typewriter. And it was just like, huh. So I started writing little stories and things, but I told everyone at school that my cousin was Kylie Minogue and I could get fan letters for like $5. And because it was the 90s, if something was typed, it was profesh. So I think writing was always just something that was there, but I never thought that I could actually do it necessarily as a career. However, in my early 20s, I wrote my first self-published book called Internet Dating Tips for Men. And ebooks were very new, not really seen as anything legitimate, but also you couldn't even really sell an ebook by yourself. I had to find an ebook broker to just to do the technology because PDFs were so big. it was really hard to email it to people. And I think that was kind of my first thing of like being a nonfiction author, of just going, tell people what you know. And I was living in London as a young 20 something, and I was doing internet dating, which was kind of new, and realizing that everyone sucked at it. And I think that's probably such a good seed for nonfiction, of just going, here's something I know. How can I tell you about it? And for the next couple of years, I did write actually a couple of other ones, and they were just little ones of like I was getting married, so I was writing about create like making a green and ethical wedding, and just kind of again what I knew. But I remember it was like 2009-ish, and I was like, universe, send me a book title for like $1 million book. And like in the shower, all best ideas come, and I was like, lucky bitch. And it this is the first copy of it. Look at my cute little author picture. And I love keeping this original copy because I even have like a lot of handwritten notes in there. And gosh, I don't even know where to start about this. It was just one of those things of like, I just want to do it, and I set a deadline. Look at all the notes in the back that I wanted to change in it. I set a deadline and I pre-sold copies, and I just wrote it in like 2 weeks, like a university assignment that was due. And yeah, launched that first book.
What's funny about that book is I looked back into our files. I went digging because we worked together in like 2017. So I went
Yeah.
back all the way back there and found the amount of copies you had sold of both Lucky Bitch and Get Rich Lucky Bitch. And combined, you had sold 20,000 copies of those books. So that's a lot. Like a lot of actual traditionally published books don't sell that much. So how were you so successful with your self-publishing venture?
I think when I first started my business, I went to a lot of conferences, a lot of events. And back then, you'd meet someone at a conference or event and you would friend them on Facebook, and I had these like little note cards they were business cards, but they were tiny little ones. And then I made ones made out of fake money with my face on it. And this was before I had kids too. So I was kind of just going to every event. And the trick is, as an introvert, that I would always do it every one of these conferences. I would be the first person to raise my hand to ask a question every single time. And I'd be like, hi, it's Denise Duffield-Thomas, author of Lucky Bitch. Here's my question. And so it was literally just sweat equity and networking and speaking to lots of people. And so then when I launched that first book, people just bought it. that
Which
I
is
knew.
amazing.
Yeah, I think that's what happened. And then I was really lucky, though, I think that first couple of years of self-publishing, when you could put it on Amazon and Kindle and all that kind of stuff, like there wasn't a ton of competition, I think, for self-published books. Whereas I think now, like, it's so much easier. The barriers are so much lower for people just to chuck stuff up there. But I was really surprised, though, that people didn't really judge it as being self-published. And I don't know, it was the weirdest thing, because I remember putting author in my email signature, and I just felt like such an imposter about it. But people would be like, oh, you have a book, you wrote a book. And I'd go, I guess I did, because you're saying it. It must be true. And I guess, yes, I do. So it was just like pushing forward and just doing it without trying to overthink it too much. And also knowing how like a book is just something that is a business card in lots of ways, especially for self-published but nonfiction. Like I very much saw it as like, this is a starting point, this is a business card. And I think too, being self-published, I knew that I could change it, which I find really hard in traditional publishing, how long things take and how static they can be. But I mean, this was literally the first version. I probably changed it like 4 or 5 times, and it's had lots of different covers, which that's the current cover, which actually does need to be updated now. But it's had like 4 or 5 different covers. And so that feeling of like, oh, it's a living, breathing thing. And it just made it feel a little bit less scary. But also, I found that what was really motivating about my second book, so that one was Get Rich Lucky Bitch, which I couldn't find a copy of. People would read the book and then just join my programs, and I'd be like, oh, how did you find out? Oh, I read your book. And then I think word of mouth was really a big thing, because I don't feel like I've even really promoted my books that much in the last couple of years. But people will say, oh, my mentor told me I had to read this book. My friend told me I had to read this book. And it just kind of grew from there. But I would say personally, I've been very unattached to them. I've just been like, you guys go out there and,
do your thing.
Do your thing. Exactly. And I actually don't, I think that's, again, that imposter syndrome. I don't feel like I'm a great writer. So when people talk about it, I'm like, let's not talk about it. It feels like people reading your diary in a little way. It's like, oh, no. Let's pretend that's not happening.
I loved your first 2 books when I read them. I was like, your voice is so you. Like, there's no other Denise, and it's very clear to me. And I think that's part of why you're successful. And certainly I see that among many of my clients, that their voice just stands out and just is like, you couldn't mistake it for anyone else. So, because you had so much success self-publishing, what made you want to switch over to traditional? A lot of authors want to do that, right?
Yes. I mean, I think there was always a part of me that thought, oh, that would be really cool to see my book in an airport bookshop. Like, that was the thing. I was like, airport bookshop, that would be so legit. So it was kind of always in the back of my mind, but it wasn't something that I was going to pursue myself, honestly, because again, I just didn't feel like I had the confidence to push myself forward for it. And also, and this is where you helped me, the publishing world felt very scary to me. And just something that I was like, oh no, I just don't even want to go there. What happened though is that Hay House approached me, and I think this was 2015, and it was Amy Kyberd, and she from the UK office, and she said, look, I've been on your newsletter list for a while, which is such a good sign, right? Of going, you never know who's watching, you never know who's paying attention to you. And she's like, I love your voice, I love what you're doing. I would love to pitch you to my bosses at Hay House. And so I was like, oh, well, if it's going to land in my lap, like, why not? And so I put together some of my numbers, sales figures and social media numbers and all that kind of stuff. And, went through the process, and she was like, you know what? They just can't get past the word bitch in your books. And my actual company name was called Lucky Bitch back then as well. So it was like bitch all over the place. And you know what? I was just so grateful to go through that process. It really taught me a lot, and just to really solidify, what the messages of the books were. And so I just said, oh my God, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you. And I'll kind of, come back to you in the future when my numbers are better or whatever. But secretly I went, okay, this has given me like a bit of a North Star now. And so I knew that the bitch thing, it was real, but also it really wasn't. I was like, if my numbers were so undeniable, like they wouldn't be able to say no. And that's kind of what I said to myself. I was like, okay, I'm going to go back and work on my social media. I'm going to like shift a few things, so then next time they will not be able to say no. And at the same time, a few things were happening in my business that were making things difficult with the word bitch. So Facebook weren't allowing my ads to go through. And not only just for my company name, I remember there was a video where like it was just on a logo on the back wall, and we had to blur it out mid launch. We had to change it on landing pages, just so many things. It was just flagging. And it was also flagging in some people's email systems. And, if they were reading my newsletter at work, it just became just a little bit annoying. So that's when we changed the company name to Denise DT. And also I just went, okay, I'm going to push those numbers. So then 2017, when I contacted you, I had the idea for the book, which at the time was called Chillpreneur. And this came out of when I had my third baby, and I was like, I just cannot do business like these guys are teaching business. Like, it just doesn't work for my nervous system anymore. And I was reading Tim Ferriss's book, Tools of Titans, and I love his books. 4 Hour Work Week for me was such a instigator, I think, in starting my business the way I did. But in Tools of Titans, there was a like a case study about this man who just like worked, got up at 4 o'clock in the morning to do a podcast. It was just crazy. And I was breastfeeding my third baby, and I was just like, I'm never going to be able to have my business ever again. Like, how am I going to do this? And, like, it's just not possible. And that's when I just went, oh no. Like, I think I remember thinking, why doesn't Tim have all these case studies about women and mothers? And then I just went, he can't. Like, how can he possibly write that book? He can't. That's not his experience. And so I just went, okay, I'm going to write a book like that I want to be able to read. And that was the seed of that. And I always knew that I wanted to pitch it to Hay House, but I didn't really, I didn't know about the publishing world, right? So I contacted them and said, look, I've got this idea. And they were like, yeah, put together a proposal. And I was just like, and then, what? How do you even? So I'm a big fan of hiring people for their expertise. Especially, I've never had a big team in my business, but I love hiring people for like, that's your piece of the puzzle. Just do that thing for me and with me, which is why I contacted you, because I wanted to pitch them this new book, but also to say to them, you can have the other books, like, because I would love to see them professionally published. And I had actually paid for an editor to go through them and like Hay House-ify them. And so I could kind of sort of go, like, make it a no-brainer offer and to say, here are my numbers now. And, to kind of package it all up and just to go, here you go.
Yeah, and that's awesome. And I think a lot of times too, what you said there is really important in terms of like being, you got approached, which does happen. I always see it as a good sign, but it's an early sign. It's not always the immediate fairy godmother type of, destiny landing in your inbox sort of thing. Not always the first time, sometimes the second, sometimes the third. Don't, take apart everything I said if I land in your inbox. Obviously, I am your fairy godmother. Go with me.
Yeah, you are.
Because we do occasionally reach out to people like that we think have talent, or that, we just got a book deal for somebody like that. Exactly. So, it's interesting that you say that. But what I wanted to point out about what you said is that you went and you hustled your buns off to get those first two books to sell. And then you leveraged that into a third deal. And I think a lot of people don't realize how that is the catalyst for the traditional deal, is that you have to have a really good sales history for these previous two books, because they don't want to pick up those other two books, even if it's a package deal, if those books aren't already selling. They basically want to make free money when you sell them those books, right? And that's what publishers are trying to do for sure. And that's what your agent probably went to them with as well.
Yes,
So,
absolutely. Which, by the way, you introduced me to my agent, because even that world is as well just felt like, oh my God, why would they even look at me? And I think to a lot of like, especially nonfiction, you just feel like I'm not a real writer, I'm not a real author. That's how I feel a lot of the time. And so the fact that you introduced me to an agent, which, to be honest, they wouldn't have looked at me if we didn't have a deal on the table. And, for me, it just felt like, oh, cool, that's just an extra, piece of the puzzle to be able to go to them and say, look, we've pretty much already got a deal in place for 3 books. So can you just represent me?
Yeah. Can you just do this?
Yeah.
And at the time, I think online entrepreneurship was relatively new too. I mean, we're talking about 2017. So I had to like explain to the publishing industry a sales funnel essentially. And you were so gracious to explain all of the world of online entrepreneurship to me. I basically got a crash course from one of the greats. It's kind of amazing. Like I remember the day, I remember sitting in my loft apartment in San Francisco, and my husband came home. And I told him, I was like, Denise says I can retire you. And he's like, what? Who's Denise? I don't want to retire him now because he makes good money and carries the health insurance, but I do one day want to out earn him, and that's just as good, right?
Yes. Oh God, there's a whole book in that of me working with my husband. It's so hard, by the way.
Bless you. Bless you. I would never, like,
God.
during COVID, we had a brilliant place, not this place, but like a brilliant place that had like suited bedrooms. And that is the only thing that saved us, is like a division of literal physical division, my Lord.
Oh, I
So
get that. Yeah.
I would love to hear what you learned, if you had one lesson to share about self-publishing and then about traditional publishing that you would tell any entrepreneur who wants to be an author.
Well, I think I've said the word imposter syndrome like a million times already in this, but I think now looking at it, you just go, oh, they're just people who are looking for books to sell. Like, it's a business, and like, they're just people. I don't know. It's such a weird thing. And I think putting yourself forward for something like that isn't strange to those people because they're looking for books, right? So they're not like, how dare you send us an idea for a book? How dare you? Because that's what they're looking for. And I think too, when I look back at this book, especially Lucky Bitch, and I think I couldn't write that now. I really couldn't. Like, I feel like I'm a bit more cynical now. And so there's times where I want to go back and like change everything in that book, but I can't because people want what that book captured in that time of my life, of like
Yep.
kind of a bit of naivete, positivity. I'm like, oh, I know too much now. I couldn't write that book, which doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means I'm so glad I captured that at that time in my life. And I know that there are books yet to come that I cannot write yet because I'm not that person yet. And that's really important too, because then you go, there is no right or wrong time to write a book, right? But there's no like waiting for the time to be right either. And that can be, I think, a hard lesson to learn. The other thing, which was really important going through the process too, and you might remember like the first version of the book
Mm-hmm.
and I loved the title, but
Yes.
I hated this cover so
The
much.
cover is bad. Yeah.
It's so bad. And I think because I was a new author, first time working in the publishing world, I pushed back as much as my good girl could push back on it. And I went, you know what? I'm going to put this out to the universe and just say, I'm so unattached. And when I see people and they're so devastated by things like that, and they're just like, and I just went, if that's the cover that they want, cool, that's fine. I will be just as unattached to this book as I am to all the other books. And I know that the book is really good. So I'm just going to be like, give it up to the universe. But I was like secretly going, universe, please just sort this out for me. So what actually happened was, so it launched in 2019. And so already, right, that's a 4-year process of when they first contacted me to when this came out with Hay House. And mid-pandemic, they went, we would love you to do a new version of this book, which how often does that happen? Like literally 2 years later. And they went, look, like the world's changed a little bit. We'd love a few more case studies. And I went, great. Can we please change the cover? And they went, yes, but we've never really liked the name. Can we change the name? And I had already created my podcast called Chill and Prosper. So I just went, great, can we call it Chill and Prosper? And then that's the new cover, which I love. And I think is just so much more me and timeless. And so that never happens, right? Where you get to change your cover and the title 2 years later.
It's very, very rare. And so the universe delivered. It might have taken its time, but the universe 100 times delivered. Okay, so your expertise is money mindset. So I'm going to ask you some money questions.
Yeah.
What money lesson did you learn by investing in help to write that proposal that landed you that Hay House deal?
I would not have done it myself at all. I just wouldn't have. And so I think it's always worth paying to shortcut success, paying to open doors. I would never have gotten an agent by myself. And actually, even having those 3 books ready to go, it still wouldn't have been enough without the personal introduction, because you know, like having an agent felt like such a big deal, but you know, it's kind of a favor based on your years and years of expertise and relationship building that got me that agent, let's face it. And so that's what you pay for, right? When you pay for expertise, is doors opening, introductions, shortcutting success, procrastination as well. And I tried to procrastinate it, and you really had to keep me on track with stuff, right? Of like, I need this, and this.
That's our job, adult babysitting. High level project
Exactly.
management, you know, like, yes,
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. And I actually paid someone to help me not write the book, but keep me on track writing the book too, because again, I knew I had a, you know, quite a long time to write it, because obviously publishing is such a longer process. But I was like, I don't want this to become something I have to do in the last 2 weeks of my deadline.
Yes, and believe you, me, I've gotten that call. It is not a good call to get.
And I've lived that experience my whole life with ADHD. And so I knew that was worth paying for as well. That pretty much took most of my advance, by the way. But I knew that I would just not have done that. And again, I think too, because I knew that for me, this, like having the books out there were, you know, marketing for me and business cards and all this kind of stuff. The money that I made from that was not feeding my kids. You know, it wasn't something that I had to rely on. And also, even now, like, I mean, all of these books sell quite well all the time, but it's not like millionaire money, right? And I see this a lot with people, that they're like, oh, well, that's going to be the thing that makes the money. And I'm like, it's not. You know, that's like a part of your funnel, and it's so worthy and worthwhile, and it is absolutely going to help your profile, your credibility, all of these things. But you have to go into it with eyes wide open. And I think that's what I did. I really went into it with a plan, and just very like unemotional. Who do I need to help me to do this, to put together the deal, to make it happen, and to help me navigate this new world that I don't know how to navigate.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I would like to delve back into the question about, or the point you made about the book not being the moneymaker. So a lot of times when people come to me, they say, you know, they're in that position where maybe our fees are their entire advance, right? But would you have said, I mean, in terms of your funnel, and you don't need to open up the whole funnel to the world, but in terms of the funnel, I would assume that your book is the lowest cost price, and that where you want people to actually, where people get the best result is in the boot camp.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing there's
Absolutely.
a pretty significant price difference between those two things.
Yes, absolutely. And there are a lot of people in my industry who do have low cost products. You know, like there's a whole thing at the moment of having like a $9 product, and it could be a webinar or a workshop or whatever. I've always kind of been like, I'm free, or it's like a significant investment to work with me, because I've always just wanted a small team. I can't be bothered with the customer service. You know, you can have difficult customers at $9, you can have difficult customers at $9,000, everything in between, right? So I've always just kind of been like, have whatever. And the only exceptions are the books. So, you know, they're a couple of dollars sometimes on sale for Kindle or audio. And then Bootcamp is 2,500. And there are literally people who have read my book and just joined my program. And of course, I've edited them and written them with that in mind, of making sure that there's links in there that send people on a, you know, down a marketing funnel kind of thing. But and also too, I think some people would go, well, why would I write a nonfiction book that tells people all of my stuff, and then why would they pay to work with me? And I always think, you know, like it's a completely different experience. And if you had your favorite artist in town, you wouldn't say, but I've listened to their songs before. Like, I know their songs, I have it on tape. Why would I go to their concert? And it's like, well, you go to their concert because it's a completely different experience, and you get to experience it with other people, and you get to, you know, get closer to that person. And so I think sometimes nonfiction people think that books are going to cannibalize their client work, but it doesn't. It only amplifies it. And the thing that always really surprises me is how many people will say to me, "You're my mentor," and yet we've never met. And they say, "Well, because I feel like I've been mentored through your books. I feel like you're my best friend. You know, I feel like that I know you through the books." And I think that is the power of having a book out there, and especially with you know, being able to do it in audio. And I always narrate my own books, which is definitely a process. It's really fun. But I really do, when I sit there in the recording studio, I dread it in the lead up to it, because I think I'm going to have to be sat there for like 3 or 4 days, like trapped in a room. But I sit there and I look at it, and I really do imagine someone listening in their car on their commute to work. I really do feel it, and I try and transmute that energy through it. And I actually got in so much trouble the first time I recorded for Hay House for Lucky Bitch, because I was like just kind of ad-libbing a little bit.
They don't like that.
They don't like it. No, it doesn't work. But I'd read something out and I'd go, "Oh, let me tell you like a little aside on this," or like, "Oh, let me tell you the real tea behind this," kind of thing. And they were like, "Oh no, you have to read it verbatim because it's the whisper sync thing for Kindle." And I was like, "Oh, that's not fun." And then the second time I did it, I was working with a new audio engineer, and he would just mark mistakes and he'd go back and fix them later. And he left in a few mistakes. And so people would be like, "Oh my God, I love the audio version," because he'd be like, "Oh no, wait, sorry, let me start again." And like, it was a total mistake, but it just added to that feeling of like, "Oh, I know her." And yeah, it's such a, like, it is a massive process sitting there and reading the book, but it is super fun. But it always makes me think of things I want to change. And actually, when I got to change from Chillpreneur to Chill and Prosper, I sent all the edits to them in a Google Doc. And I'd just be like, you know, insert this. And I added in a lot more like chill puns in there. And I remember I finished it at like 3 a.m. and like sent the Google Doc. And then I woke up at 6 o'clock and I was like, I need to put one more thing in. And because it was a live doc, I just like stuck in there and like changed one word. But
I love that.
one other thing that I did, which people are always shocked about, the very first time I got back all the edits from them, I started reading it and I found it so painful and scary to sit and read all of the changes. And so I only got to the first chapter and I literally clicked accept all and then closed it down, because I don't think I'm not precious about my words at all, but also I learned a lot about, oh, I write in the passive voice a lot, you know, and I didn't know any of those things. And so I just went, oh yeah, they haven't changed anything fundamental. They were totally happy to leave in swearing and stuff like that. So I just clicked accept all, closed it, went about my life. And then I just try not to think about them. I'm like, if that helps people, but it's not my business anymore.
I love that letting go. I love that detachment. I know it's part of your, you know, your spiritual practice and your belief system, but I love that. Like, I think that's a very healthy way to go about it. You know, I see people freaking out and holding on so tightly to their books, or I just recently had an author who was afraid to, you know, I was collaborating with her and she was afraid to read her chapters because it meant it was real, right? And we figured it out. We were able to identify it and give her the space she needed to then come back and jump right back in. But it's a journey for sure.
It
Okay.
is. It feels very vulnerable. It really does. And as I said, I would love to go back and change some things in those earlier books. However, normally what happens, I found, between versions is all the people who get Me Too'd. That was the biggest thing between 15 and 17. I was like, oh, I've put all these quotes in, all these guys who ended up being Me Too'd.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's a couple of things where sensibilities change, and I'm glad sometimes to be able to change just like slight wording or energy of things, but I'd really try not to change the essence of those books, even though I'm such a different person now. That makes sense.
And that's okay. I mean, I don't think I was listening to Taylor Swift before we got on. I don't think she's actually said she won't re-record Reputation. She can't, right? And so I think that's really smart. She's like, that was a time in my life. I don't, I've tried. It's not quite the same. It's not better. It's not an improvement. If y'all want to geek out about it, you can, but I don't think it's it's weird. It was one of those things where she couldn't replicate it. She couldn't improve upon it. It wasn't gonna, you know, differ that
I
much.
understand what she means by that too, because it's like she can't reach where she was at that time. And I totally get that. There's a couple of things that weigh on me sometimes of just like being a bit flippant about things, or, just as I learned more about the world, I think there were things where I'm like, oh, that's not very inclusive, or that's not.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually did change a lot of the language to be a lot more gender inclusive as well in a lot of my books. And, so I'm always grateful for the opportunity to fix some things like that, or, things that I didn't intend to be non-inclusive or insulting to certain people. Like I think that's important to be able to shift and grow and change.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Okay. So, what is your best piece of advice related to money for entrepreneurs who want to write a book? Since money is your sweet spot.
Oh, for entrepreneurs who want to write a book, so you have to just say, why not me? Because I've said so many times already in this interview, I don't feel like I'm a real author. I don't think I'm a particularly great writer, but I just went, why not me? And just tried to be a little bit almost dissociative about it, to be like, I'm just going to pretend that I'm going to write a book. And so I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to pre-sell it so I don't have to think about it and overthink it. I'm just going to hire someone else to help me do the proposal so I don't have to think about it. And it's almost like you have to be a bit delusional a little bit and to say, why not me? And this is the same for anything in entrepreneurship, whether you want to launch a course, a program, create an offering. I honestly think being delusional and almost pretending that someone else doing it, because if someone else wrote a book, you would just be like, oh, you wrote a book.
Yeah, you would make
Like,
such a big deal out of it, right? It wouldn't be so heavy. It wouldn't be
exactly.
such a big deal. Yes.
And you go, that is a thing that people do. They write books. Like, and so you have to pretend that you are just that person for a little bit, but put those little things into place, like, deadlines, accountability, hiring people to help you, because then you don't back out of it. Like, you just have to put the momentum in place. And it's the same thing where someone will say to me, I really want to create a course. And I go, great, hire a videographer. And they're like, but I don't know what the course is going to be. And I'm like, but you will by that time. And then hire a makeup artist, and then hire something, even if it's, just somebody, to be like, hey, this is what me and my friend did. We hired a hotel room and we're like, let's just go do it together. And because most of the time you will chicken out, you will let yourself down a million times. But most of us, we won't let other people down. We won't. And we will do the thing if we create a deadline, if we create public accountability. And I feel like that's the only way I've really made money, is just to kind of take it a little bit outside myself and just move forward. And I've never done anything perfectly ever in my business. And I'm still, like, I'm not going to say a hot mess, because I'm clearly like competent in some areas, but I feel like I'm still just making it up, right? And just giving the opportunity for people to buy from you. Like, literally make it available is my only piece of advice for most things.
I love
Make it
that though, because
available.
I think what I see all the time is like this attitude of like, I'll get to that, or it's not the right time, or I was thinking next year, or this thing or that thing, or like asking questions that are like, about the taxes on their advance when they haven't posted on Instagram in a month. It's things like that. It's just like, okay, come on, guys. Like,
I used to think, what if Oprah wants me on her show and I have to get up at 3 a.m. for hair and makeup? This was like my first year, and I'd be like, write your freaking book.
I love that though. Well, Oprah ain't calling anymore. So, I mean, she does stuff, but she doesn't do, I mean, she only gets on TV to like talk about Ozempic. So, and Harry and Meghan. So you're good.
I love Oprah always. I was actually thinking about Oprah this morning. I was like, oh, yeah, she's the best. But anyway, yes, just do the thing. Honestly, no one can make you, nobody can stop you now, especially with self-publishing. Literally nobody can stop you, but no one can force you to do it. So you have to just put those little things into place. Because I don't have any willpower either. So I've just had to, hire people like you to help and go on do the thing. Now you need to send me this one little piece. Okay, I can do
Right.
that.
Send
Okay,
me
I can
this
do that.
link. Give me this explanation. Tell me how your business works so that I can copy you low key for a little while.
Yeah.
That's the secret of my job is I get to learn and benefit from everybody, and it's pretty awesome, especially when people are as amazing as you, Miss Denise Duffield-Thomas. Thank you so much for joining
Oh,
us today. I know
thank
that
you.
our listeners are going to get a lot out of it. So y'all have some books to add to your reading list. I highly recommend Lucky Bitch, Get Rich Lucky Bitch, and of course, Chill and
Get it.
Prosper. Yay, yay,
Yay.
yay.
And thank you for asking me, because I remember when you put out something and I was like, oh, I wonder if she's going to ask me. And then you emailed and I
Oh,
was like, yes, of course. Thank you
I
for
love it. I love
asking.
it. I was grateful because, sometimes authors entrepreneurs be weird, like about that kind of stuff. Like some
Oh
people are
no,
reciprocal and some people aren't.
I love interviews. So literally every Thursday I do 5 in a row, because I love batching up my interviews. The only reason I've got 2 today, but I'm going to the hairdresser, that's why. But interviews are my favorite thing, because I can just turn up and just talk. Like, this
They're
is what I've been
very
doing my
easy.
whole life, right? I used to get in trouble
Yeah.
for talking in class. I'm like, now I get to do it for real. So thank you.
You're very welcome. You're super welcome.
Good luck, everybody. Write your book.